Here's how to design this mechanical hinge. I started off buying this cheap set of M3 machine bolts, and then I found and inserted the M3 30mm long bolt into fusion from the McMaster car library. Then I moved the bolt so that the midpoint of the shaft was 2mm above the origin. I'll explain why later. For the main sketch profile, I added a circle around the bolt with a diameter of 3.1mm, which gave a little clearance for the hinge to rotate around the bolt. Then I added another circle using a 3mm offset, followed by a center rectangle which I made tangent to the outer circle to form the top of the knuckle. Next, I used a large center rectangle below the knuckle to create the main profile for the leaf, which is the flat part of the hinge. I also added a little gap that separates the two sides of the hinge using a small center rectangle like this. After the main sketch was done, I created two leaf components, and then I extruded the first knuckle symmetrically 16mm like this. To create the leaf, I extruded that bottom half of the profile symmetrically 64mm to create the rough shape of this half of the hinge. For the opposite side, I started by extruding the top knuckle. I started the extrusion from the bottom of the bolt head and then extruded to the object, selecting the top surface of the existing knuckle before adding an offset of 0.5mm for some clearance. To make the other side symmetric, I mirrored this body around the origin to create the bottom knuckle. Here's why I offset the bolt at the beginning. Now I can close off the bottom hole of the knuckle like this and still have a symmetric hinge. Once the knuckles were done, I used the bottom leaf profile to make another leaf on this side, connecting both of the knuckles like this. Here's how the hinge looks at this point after changing the colors. The next thing I did was to add some fillets to both sides to make things look a little more aesthetic. For the mounting holes, I used the center point of the corner fillets to make the holes concentric with the corners. I also added a second outer circle to countersink the holes. As a final touch, I added some chamfers on most of the edges because I think that makes the design look more polished. Once I was happy with the overall design, I used push-pull to make the bottom bolt hole smaller so that the bolt would self-thread into the plastic to prevent it from coming out easily. The last step before printing was to add these little custom support pieces that I like to add so that I don't have to rely on the slicer generating supports. The way I do it is to create a sketch on the same plane as the bottom of the leaf, and then I project the profile of the rounded part of the knuckle, which includes where the knuckle starts to curve upwards. I use that line as the outer edge of the support, and then I create a rectangle that's 1mm thick, as well as another rectangle that's another 3mm thick. I extrude the 1mm thick rectangle into the knuckle, making sure it doesn't go into the bolt hole. Then I use the larger rectangle to create a foot for the support so that it's easier to print and also easier to snap off. Just for fun, here's how to create a simple joint for the hinge. Use a symbol, as-built joint, and change type to revolute, and then select the hinge followed by the bolt and use the center axis of the bolt as the snap point. If you want the hinge to automatically snap back flat like this, make sure you select rest and put 0 degrees to make this its resting position. To test it out, I made this custom container and then printed everything off. The link to the free files are available in my bio. Thanks for watching.